Hi, good day, friends. In this video, we are going to discuss how to implement array data structures in Python using the classes from the standard library. Arrays are one of the basic and the fundamental data structures you can get in Python. Array consists of fixed size data records where each element in the record is located based on the index, and they are stored in contiguous blocks of memory. Let me give you a visualization to show you how an array is organized. For example, imagine that we have some cars. The first car is G, the second car is R, the third car is E, the fourth is A, and the fifth is T. We call them the elements of the array, and they are in a parking lot, one behind the other. You will see that in Python arrays, the first car is indexed by 0 because arrays are 0-based index. So if you look for the index 0, it will give you the G car. If you look for the index 2, it will give you the E car. If you look for the last index 4, it will give you the T car. So that is how arrays are arranged. Index 0 with each element following the other. And that is great for arrays because due to the arrangement in contiguous blocks of memory, the performance of arrays are the best. If you want to get an array, if you want to get an element given an index of the array, you get the time complexity is constant, 0, 1. So you can quickly look up any element of an array. And Python supports several array classes. Python has lists, it has tuples, it has string, you have bytes and byte array. There's also a class called Array.array. I'll be going through each of these classes in Python that supports implementations of array and give you the advantage of each implementation. For example, first of all, let's take a list. I know all of you are familiar with what is a list in Python. Yes, a list is a mutable dynamic arrays. What we mean by being mutable is that you can change the elements of a list at will. I'll show you how to do that. Also, they are dynamic arrays because in the list you can add or remove elements from the list automatically, while Python will adjust the storage that is holding these elements. And you know something? On the screen here, you can see a list with a variable list array holding words. First David, index 0 is David, index 1 is Michael, index 2 is Henry. But a list can hold arbitrary data types. You can mix up the characters with numbers or floats and numbers and whatever. I'll show you how a list does this. But the disadvantage of mixing up different data types is that it becomes space inefficient because you have to use a larger space to store the elements of the list. Now let me show you some of the features we can get from a list. For example, using the list array we have here, which has 3 elements, we can say, okay, what is the print what is the first element. So we'll say list array, it's index 0. So if we say what is the first element, print list array 0, index 0 to give you David. So watch what the output will be. Is still the terminal is coming up. Let's see what the output will be. I'm telling you to give us the element at index 0. So you see what it gives. It says David. What if I ask you to give us the element as index 2? That is the last element. the output will be Henry. That's it. You can get the element of a list at constant time. But if you give it an index that is not in the list, for example, I say index 3 is not in the list, to give you an error. It's a list index out of range. So that's how a list is organized. Now, just as I told you, lists are mutable dynamic arrays. So I can mutate a list. That is, I can change the elements of a list. For example, let's say the first, we change it based on the index. So let's say the second element. Let's use the second element, which is Michael. Let's say I want to change it to what name should I use? Let me use Daniel. I want to change it to Daniel. Now let's see the visual presentation of how the list is. I want to give you the visual presentation of the list now. Just watch the changes. So it says we have David, Daniel, and Harry in the list. You can see it here. Now I told it to give me a visual representation of the list. It tells me. So you see, lists are mutable. You mutate a list. Now, another feature of a list is that you can add elements instantly to a list. Let me add another name. Use the append method. Let me add Elizabeth. Let me add. If I give you the representation of the list now using print, you can see that instead of having 3 elements, our list will now have 4 elements. That's how the data structure is organized. You can see it here. Say the position of the list is, it has 4 elements. With the elements added, appended, Elizabeth, it adds an element to the end of the list. So I can delete elements of a list based on the index. Now let me delete Michael. Then after deleting on line 4, I will show you what the list now contains. Let's see. You see, it says it now has only David and Henry. So Michael is off. So now let me show you that a list can have arbitrary elements. For example, this list has only characters, words. Now what if I say I add a number, 120, and then I print out the representation of the list? You see it will add 20, then add 120, then let me also add 55. So I added 2 numbers. Now let's print. You see now that the list has 5 elements with 2 numbers at the end. Can you see it here? The list now has different data types. The first 3 elements are words, while the next 2 are numbers. So that's to show you that a list can contain arbitrary data types. But just as I said, that's a disadvantage, because if it contains arbitrary data types, it becomes space inefficient. Now, many beginners to Python, they are first introduced to a list because a list is a powerful data structure. You can do a lot of things with a list, and a list is very fast. Now, apart from a list, we can also have a tuple as an array data structure in Python. I will start again with what I did with the list Now you signify tuples by the commas, and what happens is that the three words, when you put commas there, they are packed into the tuple array, into a variable tuple array. Sometimes some Pythonistas prefer putting a parenthesis here because they say it makes it more readable. So let's leave the parenthesis. So these tuples of three words. Now, what is a tuple as a data structure, an array data structure? A tuple is an immutable array. You know, the other time I told you about lists, lists are mutable dynamic arrays. Tuples are immutable and they are not dynamic. What we mean by immutable is that elements cannot be added or removed dynamically from a tuple, unlike what we can do in a list. But tuples are similar to lists because tuples can hold arbitrary data types. Now, given this tuple, I have the name tuple array. Let me show you how Python will print out a representation of the tuple. If I ask it to give me a representation of the tuple, look at what it will give. See, it gave me back a tuple. Tuple, you know tuple by the parentheses, the opening and close parentheses. So the representation of this tuple array, Python gives it back to me here. Now, let me show you that tuples are immutable. For example, let's tell it to give us the first element. Ask it to print out the first element in the tuple, first of all. If I ask it to give us, it gives us David here. But now, what if we want to change this first element of the tuple? Let's say, let me show you that tuples are immutable. Let's say I don't want the first element to be David, but I want it to be Daniel. Then I try printing out the representation of the tuple array. See what it will tell us. It says tuple object does not support item assignments here. That means, in other words, tuples are immutable. That's it. But even though tuples are immutable, they can also hold arbitrary data types. So we can add elements to a tuple. You can add elements, you can remove, you can add elements, but you cannot remove dynamically from a tuple or change the elements of a tuple. And the other array structure we will consider today is the string class in Python. For example, I have this. This is what we call a string class in Python. String, if you see it in the official documentation, it's called str class. I like calling it the string class. It is an immutable array of Unicode characters. For example, this word here, David, consists of Unicode characters, which is DAVID. They all have their Unicode representations, and it's immutable, just like a tuple. This word David are stored as characters. All of them. D has Unicode meaning A has its Unicode characteristic, V, so they are all stored in contiguous blocks of memory. And that's what makes a string class very, very powerful, because it's very space efficient. Unlike lists and tuples, which can contain arbitrary data type, the string class or the string array class contains only one data type, and that is characters or text. Contains only characters or text. So it makes it very space efficient and very fast. So this is a string tuple here. Let me print out the representation to show you how Python will store it in memory. If I tell you to print it out, it says what is stored in memory is David. That's it. Now let me show you that this string array is immutable. For example, if we say what's in index 2, we all know from our experience with zero-based indexing that what is index 2 is v. Let it give it to us. Is v. Good. Now what if we want to show immutability by saying let's change what's in index 2. I don't want it to be v any longer. I want it to be p. So I want it to be dapid. Now let's see if Python will allow such a change. So I'll print out the presentation and tell me if it's allowed. It says change object does not support item as assignment. That means the string arrays are immutable in Python. And also another feature, I showed you how you can delete an element in a list. You can also delete in a tuple the same way. But what if we want to delete in a string array? For example, we say let's delete the last element. I'm sure you are aware that in zero-based indexing in Python, the last element is deleted by -1. Or for those who are not aware, let's just say, okay, the last element is index 4. So let's put it, what to delete the second z. So I'll ask it to give me a string representation of the string array. It will deny. See, it says does not support item deletion because it's immutable. You cannot assign, you cannot delete. You cannot assign, you cannot delete. So what if you want to, for example, change a string array? The only option you have is to cast it. To cast means to convert. You have to cast it to a list. Use the list function. So I say I cast it to a list, and you see how it is now. You see that cast to a list is, let me show you how it is. So you see now that it's a list. So we can play with the list. We can say, okay, now changing the last element in the list. We can play with the list and say, okay, list array -1. That's the last element. So anytime you want to refer to the last element, just index of -1. So array -1, just put it, I want it to be Davis, then I print this array. So see the output we'll get now. So I cast this Davis string array to a list, and then you can see the string cast to a list is this. Now changing the last element of the list is now Davis. Now as I've changed it using a list, I can bring it back to a string array. Let me show you how I bring it back to a string array. Print casting the list array back to string array. Can bring it back to string array 2. Let me call it string array 2 so we don't confuse. So it will be clear to everyone. What you do is I use this concatenation function, join. So I just say join everything in the list array. Then I now print the string array 2. You see it now. We have converted. See, we've converted the David to a string. We printed out the representation of the list to a list, printed the representation of the list, and we'll cast it back to a string array is now David. So that's how you can manipulate an immutable data structure or immutable array to change it to a mutable one, then you convert back to an immutable one. So that's for the initial video on array data structures in Python. Watch out for the next video. In the next video, I'll discuss on other data structures, array data structures, such as Array.array class, the Bytes class, and the Bytes array class. I hope you did enjoy this video and you can also use it in your work. So goodbye and have a nice day. Watch out for the next array data structures video. Thank you all.